Is he serious? That's not even today's uniform. The words cut through Arlington National Cemetery like a blade. Staff Sergeant Thompson, 28, stood with his circle of fellow soldiers, their modern ACUs crisp and regulation perfect, staring at the old man walking toward them. Harold King, 82, stepped carefully from the yellow taxi, every movement deliberate. His 1968 dress uniform was immaculate, olive drab fabric softened by decades but razor-sharp creases, brass buttons mirror bright. The sound of metal touching metal created a gentle symphony as Harold walked, Purple Heart, Bronze Star, Combat Infantry Badge swaying against each other with each step. "Someone should tell Grandpa the costume party is over," Sergeant Davis laughed, phone already out, capturing Harold's slow approach. The rough manila envelope trembled against Harold's fingertips, familiar as prayer. The mockery hit like physical blows, but his weathered face remained stone still, trained by military discipline never to show weakness, even as the dry Virginia heat made his wool uniform feel suffocating. More laughter. More phones. More judgment of a man whose story they couldn't begin to imagine. If you believe no veteran should be treated this way, type honor below. White folding chairs faced a flag-draped casket beneath a canvas canopy. Harold approached with measured steps, the crunch of gravel beneath worn dress shoes providing steady rhythm. His destination, a seat where he could honor a man who meant more than anyone here understood. Colonel Harrison, 35, intercepted him 20 feet from the reserved section. Clipboard in manicured hands, uniform textbook perfect, he embodied bureaucratic authority. "Sir, I need your invitation. You're not on the guest list." Harold's weathered eyes met his. "I knew Jimmy. James Mitchell. We served together." Harrison's assessment was swift. Outdated uniform, obvious age, no documentation. "I'm sure you did, sir. But today is restricted to family and active military." He gestured toward distant plastic chairs. "You're welcome to observe from the perimeter." The word perimeter hung like a physical barrier. Harold understood. He was being marginalized, pushed to edges of a moment that belonged to him as much as anyone present. What Harrison couldn't see was the weight Harold carried. Each medal told stories written in blood and brotherhood. The Purple Heart spoke of shrapnel still aching when weather turned cold. The Bronze Star whispered of nights when being brave meant being terrified but moving forward anyway. The Combat Infantry Badge carried heaviest burden. It meant Harold had closed with and destroyed the enemy in ground combat, had looked death in the eye and lived. In the envelope against his chest, something small and metallic shifted. A promise made 55 years ago, waiting for this moment. "Yes, sir," Harold replied, voice steady despite trembling hands. Military training ran deeper than age, deeper than humiliation. Walking toward distant chairs, Harold's posture remained erect. His medals caught morning sun streaming through oak trees, creating brief flashes of light dancing across his chest. The smell of freshly cut grass filled his nostrils, mixed with sweet scent of white lilies adorning funeral arrangements. Behind him, whispered conversations resumed. Phones emerged. The discreet sounds of judgment by people who had never carried wounded through rice paddies while enemy fire cut the air. Harold took his assigned seat, white plastic warm against his legs from morning sun. From this distance, ceremony felt like something happening to someone else, but he could see the flag-draped casket clearly. The honor guard with serious young faces. Family in front row, shoulders bent with grief. In the second row, Margaret Mitchell, 75. Silver hair pulled back, hands folded with composure of a woman who understood that strength sometimes meant enduring in silence. Margaret's eyes found his across the distance. For just a moment, something flickered. Recognition. It was gone too quickly to interpret, but enough to make him sit straighter. The envelope rustled softly as he adjusted his grip. Inside, wrapped in yellowed tissue paper, lay a piece of metal no bigger than a silver dollar. To anyone else, military surplus. To Harold, everything. As preliminary ceremonies began, Harold's lips moved silently, part prayer, part promise, part conversation with a man who could no longer answer. Morning breeze finally stirred the flags, their gentle movement seeming to nod in understanding. 20 minutes into ceremony, whispers evolved from casual observation to pointed cruelty. Thompson's eyes kept drifting to Harold's distant figure, bothered by what the vintage uniform represented in his world of modern warfare and high-tech equipment. "Look at him," Thompson murmured to fellow NCOs, loud enough for others to hear. "Probably bought that uniform at surplus store." Davis had his phone out, discreetly capturing Harold in what appeared to be innocent cemetery selfie. "My grandfather's generation earned their medals. This generation, half are stolen valor cases." The term rippled like virus. Within minutes, it reached other mourners. Phones emerged. Harold's image began its digital journey through text messages and social media. "Stolen valor much?" appeared in group chat. "Disrespectful old man at military funeral" became Snapchat caption. Captain Stevens, 31, the funeral's protocol officer, escalated from whispered judgment to official scrutiny. A man who lived by regulations, who found comfort in military protocol's certainty, Stevens saw irregularities as personal affronts. Harold noticed the captain's purposeful approach, the official bearing, clipboard, as weapon of bureaucratic authority. He remained seated, waiting for judgment. "Sir, I need to ask about your uniform." Harold looked up, weathered face calm despite thundering heart. "What would you like to know, Captain?" "That uniform, it's not current regulation. We have standards for military ceremonies. I need to verify those decorations are authentic." The word authentic landed like physical blow. Stevens extended his hand toward Harold's chest, intention clear. He wanted to examine the medals, verify their legitimacy like customs inspector checking contraband. Harold's reaction was instinctive. His arm came up defensively, protecting his chest, creating barrier between reaching hand and medals representing the most sacred moments of his life. "Sir, I need to examine those decorations," Stevens pressed, voice carrying edge of challenged authority. Movement drew more attention. Phones turned openly toward confrontation. Ceremony continued in foreground, but different drama unfolded in background. "These are real, son." Harold's voice barely above whisper, carrying absolute conviction. "Every single one." But words were lost in growing circle of observers. His voice, weakened by age and emotion, couldn't compete with authority in Stevens's tone or surrounding judgment. The envelope fell from Harold's lap as he struggled to rise, 82-year-old knees protesting. Manila paper hit gravel with soft thud. Harold bent slowly to retrieve it, joints creaking audibly in morning stillness. Devastating image. Old man in outdated uniform struggling to pick up paper while young officer questioned his integrity. Phones recorded every second of vulnerability. As Harold straightened up, envelope clutched protectively, Stevens' radio crackled. "Captain Stevens, what's your status?" Stevens keyed microphone, eyes never leaving Harold's face. "Base, this is Stevens. I need security at Section 7. Situation with unauthorized personnel." Words echoed across cemetery like death sentence. Unauthorized personnel. Not veteran, not elderly gentleman. Just bureaucratic designation stripping away every bit of Harold's humanity and service. 2 security guards began approaching, radios crackling. Harold could feel hundreds of eyes upon him, sense phones still recording, taste metallic tang of humiliation on morning air. And still, somehow, Harold remained standing. Still, medals continued catching light. Still, the promise carried for 55 years remained unbroken, waiting for fulfillment. In the space between heartbeats before security guards reached him, Harold King made a decision that would change everything. He could see them approaching with measured pace of men who had performed this duty countless times. But Harold had not traveled 847 miles, had not worn his dress uniform at 4:30 a.m., had not carried a promise for 55 years, only to be escorted away like common trespasser. With movements belying his 82 years, Harold stepped away from plastic chair and began walking toward ceremony's front. Not quickly, aged legs wouldn't allow speed, but with steady, implacable advance of a man who had once walked through enemy fire to reach wounded comrade. Whispered conversations grew urgent. Phones tracked his movement like surveillance equipment. Stephen spoke rapidly into radio, calling for intervention. But something about Harold's posture, the absolute reverence in his bearing, caused security guards to slow their approach. Nothing threatening about this old man. Only an elderly veteran walking toward flag-draped casket with careful steps of someone approaching sacred altar. Harold's destination was never in doubt. Past rows of seated mourners, past official protocol, past barriers of bureaucracy and suspicion, he walked directly to casket holding Colonel James Mitchell's remains. Honor Guard, 4 young soldiers in dress blues, watched with uncertainty. Training had prepared them for many contingencies, but not this. Unauthorized elderly veteran approaching their post with tears streaming down weathered cheeks. At casket's edge, Harold stopped. American flag draped across polished wood was perfect in placement, each fold precise. Red, white, and blue fabric seemed to glow in filtered sunlight. With trembling fingers, Harold opened manila envelope carried like sacred relic. Paper rustled softly, sound amplified in sudden hush, falling over nearby observers. From inside, wrapped in tissue paper yellowed with age, Harold withdrew small piece of metal. Regimental pin, size of silver dollar, blackened with age but bearing distinctive insignia of 1st Infantry Division. Pin had been worn on combat helmet in 1968, traveled through Vietnam jungles, blessed by fire and brotherhood transcending decades. Metal felt warm in Harold's palm, heated by morning sun and intensity of his grip. As he leaned forward, metals swayed gently, creating soft chiming harmonizing with wind through cemetery's oak leaves. "Welcome home, Jimmy," Harold whispered, voice so low only flag-draped casket could hear. "I kept my promise." With infinite care, Harold placed regimental pin on flag, positioning it directly over heart of man who lay beneath. Small piece of metal settled against fabric with softest touch, but placement sent ripples through watching crowd like stone dropped in still water. Margaret Mitchell, seated in front row with composed dignity of 45-year military wife, saw everything. Hands flew to mouth as recognition dawned. Memory flooded back. Pieces of puzzle unsolved for half-centuries suddenly clicked into place. She recognized the pin. Had seen it once before, clutched in young husband's fist as he lay in Saigon hospital bed, barely alive, speaking in fevered whispers about Sergeant who had carried him from hell itself. Margaret Mitchell's voice cut through morning air with Bell's clarity, carrying authority transcending rank, protocol, and bureaucracy. At 75, she had buried parents, siblings, and now husband of 45 years. She had endured military life's uncertainty, wartime deployment's terror, slow agony of watching loved one fade in hospital bed. She had nothing left to lose and everything to gain from this moment of truth. "Stop," she said, voice stronger now, more certain. "Please, everyone stop what you're doing." Ceremony ground to halt with military units' efficiency responding to direct order. Chaplain's words faded into silence. Honor Guard's eyes remained fixed forward, but attention focused completely on elderly woman rising from front row. Margaret walked toward Harold with measured steps of someone who had made decision changing everything. Each footfall on manicured grass echoed with decades' weight, secrets ready for revelation, justice ready to be served. Harold turned slowly, weathered face showing careful blankness of man expecting nothing good from official attention. His medals caught morning light as he faced approaching woman, but eyes remained ground-fixed, trained by lifetime of military discipline never to challenge authority. "Look at me," Margaret said softly, and Harold's eyes rose to meet hers. In that moment, eyes locked across expanse of grief and ceremony, Margaret saw him, really saw him, for first time. Not elderly man in outdated uniform, not subject of whispered judgments and social media posts, but 23-year-old sergeant who had risked everything to save stranger in jungle half-world away. "This uniform," Margaret said, reaching out to touch one of Harold's medals with fingers trembling with emotion, "belongs here. It always has." Her voice carried across cemetery, reaching every mourner, every official, every person who had spent morning questioning Harold's right to be present. Combat Infantry Badge felt warm beneath her fingertips, real and solid and earned through sacrifice she could barely imagine. Because the man wearing it, Margaret continued, voice growing stronger with each word, saved my husband's life. Silence that followed was absolute. 300 people held breath as Margaret turned to face crowd, hand still resting on Harold's chest, voice carrying authority that comes only from absolute truth. Saigon, 1968, she began, transporting everyone present to different time, different war, different world. My James was 19, private in 1st Infantry Division. He was trapped in building hit by rocket fire, flames everywhere, enemy fire cutting down anyone who tried to reach him. Margaret's free hand gestured toward Harold, who stood motionless beside her, tears streaming down cheeks as memories flooded back with artillery shells' force. This man, Sergeant Harold King, went into that building. Twice. First time to scout, second time to bring James out. He carried my husband on his back for 300 yards, while enemy fire cut air around them. He took shrapnel in his own leg doing it, but never stopped moving, never put James down, never gave up. Crowd was transfixed, watching elderly woman paint heroism picture Hollywood could never capture, sacrifice transcending rank and race and time's passage. Margaret walked to Casket and picked up regimental pin Harold had placed minutes earlier. Small piece of metal caught light as she held it aloft, no longer just military surplus, now talisman, symbol, bridge between past and present. James kept this for 55 years, Margaret said, voice breaking slightly. Every day. He carried it in his pocket during our wedding, our children's births, every moment of joy and sorrow we shared. He said it belonged to bravest man he ever knew, and someday he hoped to return it. Harold's composure finally cracked. Tears that had been threatening since morning now flowed freely down weathered cheeks, carrying decades of unspoken gratitude, brotherhood honored, promises kept. Before James died last week, Margaret continued, he asked me to find you. He'd been looking for years, but Harold King is common name, and Army couldn't help locate you. He wanted to thank you one more time. He wanted to tell you that every day of our life together was gift you gave us. Transformation in crowd was visible, palpable. Phones that had been recording mockery now captured something sacred. Whispers of stolen valor became murmurs of awe. Young soldiers who had questioned Harold's authenticity now saw their own service reflected in medals on his chest. Thompson stood frozen in realization of what he had done. Man he had mocked as pretender was genuine war hero, earning decorations through blood and sacrifice while Thompson was decades from being born. Stevens, protocol officer who had demanded to inspect Harold's medals, now saw same decorations with completely different eyes. Purple Heart spoke of wounds received in service. Bronze Star told of valor in combat. Combat Infantry Badge marked Harold as warrior who had closed with and destroyed enemy in ground combat. Colonel Harrison, who had directed Harold to distant seating, approached with cover in hands, face showing shame that comes from profound recognition of error. Sir, he said to Harold, voice formal but thick with emotion, I apologize for everything. Please take my seat. He gestured toward place of honor in front row. One by one, every military officer present removed covers and stood at attention. Gesture rippled through crowd like wave. First active duty, then veterans, then family members, until 300 people stood in silent acknowledgement of hero who had been hiding in plain sight. Margaret placed Harold's hand in hers and began walking toward front row. This man didn't come for attention, she said to crowd, voice carrying across cemetery with absolute clarity. He came to say goodbye to brother he saved 55 years ago. He came to honor promise made in jungle on other side of world. He came to show us what real service looks like. Harold King sat in front row, flanked by Margaret Mitchell and her children, occupying place of honor that should have been his from beginning. Plastic chair in distant section sat empty, stark reminder of how close they had come to allowing pride and prejudice to overshadow truth. When ceremony reached its most solemn moment, flag folding, Harold was invited to participate. His aged hands worked alongside younger hands of honor guard, each fold precise and meaningful. Flag that had covered his brother's casket now formed perfect triangle, stars visible at top, stripes hidden in careful geometry of military tradition. Margaret accepted flag from honor guard, but instead of keeping it, turned to Harold. James would have wanted you to have this. You gave him life worth living. This is least we can do. Harold's hands trembled as he accepted flag. Cotton fabric felt impossibly heavy, weighted with moment's significance. Brotherhood it represented, closure it provided. But true transformation was yet to come. General Patricia Williams, who had been observing from respectful distance, approached Harold with measured steps of someone carrying institutional authority's weight. At 58, she commanded Military District of Washington, responsible for all military ceremonies in nation's capital. "Sergeant King," she said, offering crisp salute. Harold returned with muscle memory older than most people present. "I need to speak with you." Instead of rebuke Harold expected, General Williams reached into briefcase and withdrew thick manila folder. "Sergeant King, I've been in contact with Army Human Resources Command. Your service record makes interesting reading." She opened folder, revealing pages of military documents, award citations, correspondence dating back decades. "You were recommended for Silver Star by your commanding officer after action that saved Private Mitchell's life. Paperwork was submitted, processed, approved. But in Tet Offensive's chaos, it was never delivered. Award has been sitting in file for 55 years, waiting for right moment to find its way home." Harold's eyes widened as General Williams lifted small blue box from folder. Inside, nestled against white satin, lay Silver Star, America's third highest military decoration for valor in combat. "By authority vested in me by United States Army," General Williams said, voice carrying across cemetery with ceremonial formality, "I present you with Silver Star, awarded for gallantry in action against enemy while serving with 1st Infantry Division in Republic of Vietnam." As General Williams pinned Silver Star to Harold's vintage uniform, beside other medals that suddenly seemed to shine with new purpose, gathered crowd pressed closer to witness this unexpected ceremony within ceremony. "Furthermore," she continued, "effective immediately, Military District of Washington is implementing Harold King Protocol. Never again will veterans' service be questioned based on uniform's age or their appearance. Every veteran who wishes to attend military ceremony in this district will be welcomed with dignity and respect their service has earned." Thompson, who had made first cruel comment, approached Harold with obvious difficulty. Young NCO's face showed shame that comes from profound recognition of error. "Sir," Thompson said, voice barely above whisper, "I need to apologize. What I said this morning, there's no excuse. I was wrong. About everything." Harold looked at young soldier, saw himself at that age, saw military bearing that comes from genuine service, saw pain of someone who had discovered good people sometimes do thoughtless things. "Son," Harold said, placing weathered hand on Thompson's shoulder, "you don't owe me apology. You owe it to yourself to remember that every uniform has story, and every veteran has earned right to tell it." As crowd finally began to disperse, Harold remained standing beside casket of old friend. Margaret had left him alone for final moment, understanding some goodbyes are too personal for witnesses. "Mission accomplished, Jimmy," Harold whispered to flag-draped casket. "Rest easy, brother. The watch is ended." Wind stirred flags throughout cemetery, creating symphony of fabric and honor that seemed to acknowledge his words. Afternoon sun slanted through oak trees, casting long shadows across perfectly manicured grass. His uniform, vintage but authentic, faded but honored, caught golden light as he walked slowly toward cemetery's entrance. Medals on his chest chimed softly with each step. No longer source of mockery, but symphony of service recognized, honor restored, promises kept. Some uniforms, Harold reflected as he walked toward waiting taxi, aren't worn to be seen. They're worn to be remembered. And some recognitions, no matter how long delayed, are always worth the wait. If this story moved you as much as it moved me while researching it, consider supporting this work. Every veteran's story deserves to be told with dignity. Subscribe now. We have more stories of quiet heroes who change the world. See you in the next one.